Well, if somebody has been working in a business for 50 years and it's been the subject of dinner table talk, and oh, by the way, you go over to grandpa's house every Saturday night for dinner and talk about business, it's now a part of you. And now you're turning 70 and you don't trust the next generation. So you're not willing to give them any slack, and they're chomping to the bit. The next generation is probably in their 40s. And it's like, hey, I got this. And dad says, no, you don't. And I've seen some horrible situations where people just won't let go because it's letting go of their identity that they've built for the whole life.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. A lot of people spend their whole career trying to become important. Chip Scholz spent his figuring out why that's the wrong goal. He's a leadership coach who's worked with executives and business owners for decades. He's a woodturner and the author of Every Dog Has Its Day, a book born out of a stroke, a lathe, and a postcard his father gave him as a kid. He coaches leaders through blind spots, identity shifts, and the hard transition from building something to letting it go. We talk about hubris, self-awareness, what it actually means to lead yourself, and why the freedom you're looking for might be on the other side of not needing to matter quite so much. So if you've ever confused being important with being useful, and spoiler alert, I think we all have, well, this one's for you. Chip Scholz, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
God, James, I'm so glad to be here.
It's a beautiful day, and I just found out before we hit record, we are not very far from each other, just down the highway about 2 hours. If you go 85, if I go 85 south, you go 85 north.
Yeah, so we are two spirits in the same state. And most of that state is confusion. I don't know if it's North Carolina or confusion, but that sounds either way.
I think you just described North Carolina weather. It's constantly in a state of confusion, but yeah, that's the running joke for sure.
I don't know if you're up there, if it's the same thing up there, but it's 60 degrees here this morning.
I think it's a little colder here. I do have the windows open, and it's not the most responsible thing I've done all week, but it feels nice.
It feels good. It feels great. Really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. I loved your story when I started reading about the things that you've done to grow for your own personal growth. And you have been training leadership for a long time, for your entire career. You've written a couple of books, and I want to talk about your latest book. It's called Every Dog Has Its Day, and some of the lessons that you learned along the way to lead you to writing that book and hopefully inspiring other generations of leaders. And what I really would love to talk about is something you said in your bio. And it's that there's a freedom in not being important. And I want to dig into that and find out what that means, because so many of us are trying to be important, and goodness knows in this world of social media, everyone's screaming, look at me, I matter, I am important. And you're saying there's a lack of freedom in that.
Well, there is, because it leads to performance. And that's where the phrase every dog has his day resonated and sank into my soul, is that every dog has his day. Everybody has their 15 minutes of fame. And some people's 15 minutes are 15 years. Some people it's 15 seconds, but everybody has their 15 minutes of fame. And then it's over.
Mm.
And here's the other part. Have you heard the Latin term memento mori?
Oh, I'm very intimately familiar with that. I have a piece of art hanging in my bathroom, and it is basically a book page, and everything is redacted in that page except the words memento mori. It's huge too. It's 3 feet tall, right in my bathroom.
Wow.
I see it every day. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting that everything's redacted. Are you a fan of the Stoics?
Very much.
And I think it was Marcus Aurelius who said memento mori. And I've really enjoyed it. In fact, one of the books that I really like is The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Have you seen that one?
I have that one, and I don't look at it daily. I got it years ago, but every once in a while I will just go to a page, whatever page, and take it in. And I've been studying the Stoics, I guess we're going on like 8-9 years now, and it's fascinating.
Well, it is. It's absolutely fascinating. And the reason I mentioned the Daily Stoic is I did it a day at a time. I did it every day for a year and started on January 1st, 2020.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And when it came to March 30th, I think it was a Marcus Aurelius quote about not being able to control your mind. And let's face it, March 30th, 2020, everybody was losing their minds.
They sure were looking for toilet paper and all the things. Yeah.
Toilet paper and hand sanitizer and God, and getting locked down and oh man, couldn't go to restaurants. And here in North Carolina, we were a whole lot better off than you were if you were in New York or California or some of the other states. So we opened up maybe a little bit more, but still, when everybody was losing their minds, and basically the ability to control your mind and control your reactions to things is so important to people. Back to memento mori, everybody's going to die. I haven't figured out, nobody has figured out this whole linear time thing. And I'm not a fan of linear time, but I haven't figured out an alternative. So we are all going to die. And one day we're going to be dust. And, what became important to me, a couple of things, is my parents died early. My dad was 51. My mom was 56. It's been 42 years since my dad's been gone, and 39 years since mom has been gone. That plays all kinds of games with your head. And then 27 days shy of the date of the age when my mother died, I had a stroke. So for the last 14 years, I've been living on bonus time.
Yeah.
I wake up every morning. Thank God I can wake up and draw a breath and do what I need to do. So the idea of every dog has its day, it like I said, it just sank in my soul and became so important to me as I went through things. There's a poem that I wrote in the book. My dad, when I was about 8 years old, gave me this postcard. And the postcard was from Atlantic City, and it was some restaurant that no longer exists on the boardwalk. And the poem was written by GIC salesman, whoever that was. Since learned there actually is an attribution for that, but hey, it was always GIC salesman. I mean, that was the bon mot that was given for that. And the poem is called The Water Cure. Do you mind if I read it?
Please.
Sometime when you're feeling important, sometime when your ego's in bloom, sometime when you take it for granted you're the best qualified in the room, sometime when you feel that your going would leave an unfillable hole, just follow these simple instructions and see how they humble your soul. Take a bucket and fill it with water, put your hand in up to your wrist, pull it out, and the hole that's remaining is a measure of how you'll be missed. You can splash all you please as you enter, you can stir up the water galore, but stop and you'll find that in no time it looks quite the same as before. The moral of this quaint example is do the best you can, be proud of yourself, but remember, there is no indispensable man.
Oh, that is humbling indeed.
Isn't that, and I was given to it when I was 8 years old or 10 years old or something like that. And maybe I was being cocky as a fourth grader, or maybe I thought I was a better pitcher at Little League than I was. But I guess my dad was giving me a lesson, and I didn't see it for years. And then I was going through some old boxes probably 20 years ago, and came across it again. And between those life experiences and that poem just hit me that there is nobody indispensable. I mean, we are all going to die. So you do the best you can while you're here, but it's not important to be important.
Mm.
And
you say it's more important to be useful.
Yeah, it's more important to be useful. It is much more important to be useful. I do the best I can with coaching. I've coached probably 200 or 300 people over the course of my career. I've got some clients that I've had for an awfully long time, and in fact, my one client that I talked to the other day was about 20 years, and he's actually put up with me talking to me once a month for 20 years, and we see each other all the time. He's up in Philadelphia, and God, I love him. He's just a wonderful, wonderful person. I teach woodturning, and I'm the president of the North Carolina Woodturners. It's not because I really want to be important, because I don't care. It's just that I love woodturning, and I just want to give back. Want to do the best I can.
And for people who are driving down the highway right now in their car, hopefully you're driving in your car if you're on the highway, but and they're thinking, okay, wait, the record just scratched. What is leadership and wood turning? How do they correlate with each other? And the coolest thing about doing this podcast every week is I get to talk to people who have connected dots that others haven't really connected in, maybe in their own life, or even seen being connected. And to take someone who coaches people in a leadership capacity who learns something profound in the wood shop, that's a conversation I want to have. So tell me what it is you learned in the wood shop so long ago.
Well, it's reflected in the subtitle of the book. It's reflections on life, love, and the lathe. And you don't often hear life, love, and lathe all in the same sentence, And in fact, I'd be willing to bet that most of your audience doesn't know what a lathe is.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, because it's kind of a, I don't know, it's something that everybody uses, but it's kind of a fringe thing. If you've ever used a wooden bowl for your salad, you can thank somebody who had a lathe. And, yes, there are industrial lathes and that kind of thing, but the really great bowls are the ones that are turned by hand. And you really can't tell, well, you can tell machine versus hand turn because of the detail, because of the way the bottom is finished and the way the work is signed and that kind of thing. When you get a good custom-made bowl or a pepper mill or any of those kind of things, it says a lot about the craftsman. It also says a lot about you and your willingness to support bespoke work. But there are so many parallels. One of the stories that I tell in the book is I've been married almost 42 years and 3 girls, and so I'm a girl dad. And there's a thing called a hollow form, which is like a vase or some kind of a vessel that's hollowed out on the inside. And I had a teacher a number of years ago that taught me about craftsmanship, and he said the craftsmanship is on the inside as well as the outside. So even though nobody's ever going to see the inside of a hollow form, you need to have as good craftsmanship on the inside as the outside. Just because you're making a bespoke item, you want it to be as good as possible. I think it's very close to a marriage. And a marriage that has lasted a long time is nobody sees the work that's gone into it. They see the outward face. They see us going and playing golf or traveling or out to dinner with friends or that kind of thing. But they don't see all the work that it took to make it happen for 42 years. We just make a lot of assumptions about people that have been married a long time. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, my kids lost a lot of bets over the years, whether we stay together or not. And thank God they did. Thank God they lost them. I see the parallels in leadership. I see the parallels in how we deal with people and in the way that wood is harvested versus, the way that we meet people. And sometimes they become important in our lives and sometimes they don't. But the wood never stops turning or never stops moving. So, when I've got a bowl, and it's in a North Carolina environment, which is a fairly moist environment, it stays in one state. But then you take it to Utah, which is extremely dry, and it's going to warp. It's going to shift. In fact, I had a platter that I made here in North Carolina, and I thought it was stable and it looked good and everything. And I shipped it to a friend of mine in Florida, and it got to Florida and it warped. All of a sudden I had something that was like a round platter that just was not supposed to be round. So
because of the humidity difference.
Yeah.
Yep. I love a hand turned bowl. Actually, I was at a artisan's market in a place called Little Washington, which is east of me, getting near the coast. It's called the Inner Banks. For people familiar with the Outer Banks, it's the group of towns and cities inland from that. And this guy was turning from just raw timber. And he had the most interesting bowls, and they had all of these imperfections, and some of the edges were live edge. And we were both there, and I was geeking out on it because I grew up in my grandfather's wood shop. And he had a lathe, and he would turn spindles. He would turn all sorts of different things. When I had my first child, he made a little cradle that rocked, but it had to be dozens of these really delicate little spindles. And each one was just perfect. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, how much time that must have taken. And how much fun he probably had knowing that it was where it was going to end up and how it was going to be used. So I certainly have a lot of respect for the craft of woodworking and turning. I was never very proficient at it. I wasn't patient enough.
Well,
so
the average age of a woodturner is 67, so you still got time, James.
Okay, I've got a lot of runway. not a lot, but I've got some runway there. Okay. That's cool. Well, when you really got into the wood turning and you started to understand what it was teaching you, how did you shift your coaching practice when you were working with other leaders?
Have you heard of the book The Second Mountain by David Brooks?
I haven't.
It is a great book. If you get a chance to read it, it's very profound. And I think you've got some second mountain in you. The first mountain is defined by wealth and power and being important. And then there's some kind of a crisis. And maybe it was getting laid off in May of 98. Maybe it was the stroke. I don't know. But the second mountain, the climb of the second mountain is about meaning and purpose. My mother-in-law was a great woman. She was pretty incredible. She died 12 days shy of her 98th birthday, and she died in my easy chair in my wife's arms. It was such a honor to be part of that. She was very crafty. She did a lot of theorem painting and she did all kinds of crafts for most of her life. And she's the one who really got me into a hobby or got me into lathe because she always felt that I should be useful. And I was working way too many hours and it was that second mountain that I started to climb after the stroke. My wife gave me a lathe for Christmas. And I just fell in love and started to enjoy it. And, kind of gave me a whole different reason to do things. And that coincided with a deepening of meaning and purpose for my work as well. And eventually that led to writing. I've got a couple books out and I've got another one coming out in October. That led to all of that. I don't think if I were climbing the first mountain, I would have been interested in any of that. Does that make sense?
totally makes sense, because you can only divide your energy up in so many different ways and still be effective. And I found this in my own life, in my own career. There were those years where you're doing what I call the grind, and you are climbing that first mountain, and you're building the family, you're building the business, whatever it is that you're building at that point. And then I know for me, it happened as well. There's something that comes along to challenge your notion of what happiness is or what success looks like. And then you have to sort of shake that off and figure out, okay, what does it look like now? What does my identity look like? What does my happiness look like? What does my career look like? And I love talking with people who have experienced it and then made the choice to help other people through whatever it is they're coming up against in their life, whether that is external circumstances or an internal struggle, just like you've done with your book. And it took me toward more of a meaning of purpose, which is the reason this whole podcast exists, because I thought, wow, I've been through some heavy stuff, and I keep talking to people and I keep meeting people who've been through some heavy stuff. And you know what? They tend to be over a certain age and have gained a certain amount of wisdom the hard way. Not the easy way, not the I read it in a book way, but they were like, I read this in a book, and I was like, oh man, that's too bad for that person. And then it happened to me, and I had to go back and remember that this has happened to other people. I might need to get some of their wisdom. So I love it when people like you have things happen, they grow from them, and then they decide to help others, because that's so important. And that's what I hope this podcast does.
Yeah, thanks. I heard this recently. There's a friend of mine that's a podcaster named Art Blanchford, and he's a pretty bright guy, does a lot of studying, but also has a lot of lived experience as well. He said that there are 3 stages of retirement, and the first stage is vacation. So it's like Kevin running around at home alone with your, yeah, everything's great. And then that lasts for about 6 months, and then it's followed by depression because you haven't found meaning and purpose in that whole run up to retirement. And the final stage is meaning and purpose. Well, why I get enough vacation. I get to do pretty much what I want to do, and I just don't want to be depressed. Life's too short to be depressed. I've gone on to meaning and purpose, and I don't plan on taking calls when I'm in my hospital gown, but I do plan to continue to do what I'm doing. And to me, that gives me joy. May not make me rebellious, but it gives me joy.
Well, I think sometimes the rebellion is in the simple things. And you talk a little bit about this in your work, where the major areas of growth and the epiphanies in life, they tend to be quiet. They don't tend to be something you can point at on the calendar and say, it was this day that my life changed. Now, I talk to a lot of people who they can point to a day on the calendar when their life took a completely different trajectory. But for others, something you say in your work is that it comes in those quiet moments. It comes in those little things that build on each other. Talk a little bit about how you might work with a leader to help them understand that if they're struggling with I haven't made it yet. How do you frame it for them so that they might start to understand, okay, you're making it a little bit day by day?
Have you ever heard of a Black Swan event?
I've heard of it. I don't know that I know exactly what it is.
So a Black Swan event, I can't remember, Talib something or other wrote a book on Black Swan several years ago. And what he talked about was these are events that in hindsight seem glaringly obvious. So everybody in the world should have seen 9/11 coming. Everybody in the world should have seen whatever event happens to be happening. And everybody looks back at it and says, oh, yeah, well, God, we should have seen the signs. But when you're going through it, you don't see the signs. And they don't add up.
Mm.
And, even if I go back to Pearl Harbor, the guys at the radar station that were on that mountain who saw this huge incoming fleet and ignored it because they couldn't believe it. They thought it was clouds or something. We have those things that we look back at our life and say, oh, that was a big thing. But when we're in it, it doesn't feel like it. Yes, okay, if you're in a horrible, tragic accident, you can pretty much count on that. If that's the day that you lost your mobility, you can count on it. But for most of us, I didn't have a stroke because I woke up one day and this thing happened to me. I had 50 years of poor living habits that compounded to give me a stroke. I was hugely overweight. I wasn't working out. I quit smoking, but I smoked for a number of years. My blood pressure went out of control. There are signs if you choose to read them, if you choose to heed them, if you choose to be aware of them. That really comes down to the whole self-awareness. Are we really self-aware? Are we aware enough of what we're doing, what we're feeling, what we're thinking at a particular time to be able to pick up the signs? One of my favorite books is Being Wrong. It's written by Catherine Scholz, no relation at all. That one is with a T. And it was written in 2011, I think. She did a TED Talk. So if you ever get a chance to look at a TED Talk, Catherine Scholz, Being Wrong. And that book had a big effect on me because I realized that I was wrong most of the time. And it took me a couple of years to figure that out and to start paying attention to the little things that can add up.
And it got me thinking in a couple of different directions, because in your life as a coach, you coach leaders, and from what you described, there are several that you've coached for quite a while. And you talked about self-awareness, which I love. We talk about awareness all the time on the show because nothing changes until there's awareness around the fact that something needs to change. For you, that was a stroke, and you realize, oh, all of these things led up to that, all of these habits that you had over the time before. And then it created this acute level of awareness. And it made me think of you as a coach. You help people, and leaders specifically, you help them see their blind spots a little bit, because no matter how hard we look for details and look at the details, we are all still going to have blind spots, right? So you as a coach help people through that. Do you tend to find commonalities or things that high functioning leaders might have in common in terms of blind spots that you either help point out or help them see for themselves?
Yeah. And it comes under the heading of hubris. Hubris is a great word. It's believing your own bullshit. It's believing your own press. It's believing who you are so much that you can't figure out that you're being wrong. I've gotten a chance to know some really great leaders, and I've gotten to know some really jerks. I've seen both. And it's a stunning lack of self-awareness. It's a stunning lack of self-awareness because they think they're being funny and the jokes they tell really aren't. And they just don't have the ability to understand that they're doing that. Here's a kind of a cool thing about self-awareness. You've been angry before, James, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So where in your body do you feel anger?
Usually for me, it's like right below my chest, right above my stomach, like right there where things just tense up.
Okay. So close your eyes for a second. So think back to a time when you were really angry, and you don't have to tell me what it is, but think back to a time and really focus on the emotion of that time. So you feel that in the pit of your stomach, in kind of between your stomach and your chest. If the emotion has a shape, what shape is it?
Triangle.
If the emotion has a color, what color is it?
It is orange.
If the emotion has a texture, when you feel it, what texture is it?
It's like a cactus.
Okay. If the emotion has a temperature, what temperature is it?
Slightly cooler than hot, but very warm.
Okay. Open your eyes. Have you ever described a emotion in physical terms before?
No.
And there's some biological things that are going on that allow us to feel those emotions physically and to have a physical representation of the cactus-like triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to be in the situation. So you don't have to be angry with me to summon anger and the emotion of anger. And what happens is some hormones and some short chain peptides and amino acids flood the blood system, and they fit into receptors in certain parts of your body. And that's why you get those physical feelings. So you have now described anger for you. And self-awareness says that when you start to feel the triangle, slightly warm, cactus, orange thing, you'll have an awareness of what's happening to you. And you'll be able to do something about it. You'll be able to breathe and let your anger subside. You'll be able to deal with it. So that's really self-awareness. And hubris is the stunning lack of self-awareness. It's not paying attention to the room. It's not paying attention to the signals that are going on in your body. And man, that's tough stuff.
It must be difficult as a coach to understand how sometimes people can be brilliant and they can be really high performing. And in a lot of cases, their intentions might even be good.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, they are in their own way for some of the most basic of human reasons. What do you make of that?
Some of the best leaders that I know find ways to have touchstones. And I think that's incredibly important. One of the CEOs that I know stops by his grandkids' house every morning on the way to work to play with his grandkids before he goes in. That's a touchstone because he remembers why he's doing it. You know, and he travels quite a bit, so it doesn't happen every day. But that's his touchstone. How do you lose that ability to be a real person? The best cultures that I've seen in companies are people-oriented, performance-driven. So people-oriented, people first, performance-driven, because it's not a nonprofit. It's a for-profit business. So there has to be performance, but it's when performance gets in front of people that bad things happen.
I like that. I think every leader should listen to that. And I would like to rewind a little bit because you talked about the 3 stages of retirement. I would love to talk about, in your experience, over the last several decades of coaching high performing leaders, could you sum up, are there maybe 3 or however many it needs to be distinct phases of leadership? Like if you get a new client that you've been with, let's say 10, 15 or more years, and you've seen them go through just natural progression from when they were young and fell into that hubris category maybe a little more often than they do now, how would you maybe break that down into the phases that you see that seem to be having a lot in common with each other?
Nobody has ever asked me that, James, so I appreciate it. It's almost kind of like the Marion Kubler-Ross thing, stages of acceptance of death or whatever,
Yeah.
or grief. people, as they grow, as they develop, it's really important that people have a coach, especially if you're in business, a business coach, not a life coach, because I don't really want somebody to go with me on dates. Somebody that is able to ask you all the right questions, and hopefully you'll listen. So I think it's really humbling to have a coach that's good and can ask you the tough questions, and a coach that's not afraid to ask you the tough questions. Now, just about every one of my coaching engagement starts with a 360. Do you know what a 360 is?
Where you kind of do an inventory of how's the family feel about you? How do the employees feel about you? Is that?
Yeah, usually it doesn't include family, but it's your boss, your peers, and your subordinates. So it's everybody around you, and you ask for feedback from all of those groups. And sometimes it's done electronically with a survey. Sometimes it's done in person with an interview. But at the end, you end up with a report that says, here's some things that are extreme strengths that everybody says, and here's some areas for development. Which is funny because everybody goes right to the areas of development, doesn't look at the strengths at all. It's like, oh yeah, I know the strengths. But the people that are self-aware usually are not surprised by the areas of development. They know that they've got to work on those things. And the way that I always frame it up is, okay, so if you want to go to the next level, are these areas of development important for you to go to the next level? And if they are, you better be working on them. Like 80% of the 360s I run include delegation, because we suck at delegation. Probably 50% is executive presence. And that is a huge thing, is the way that you communicate, the way that you dress is really important too. The way that you hold yourself. Do people take you seriously? That's quite a bit. But if people are willing to accept that feedback, and if people are willing to work on that feedback, and that's the really important part is, do you have a good coach? Are you able to work on it? And it's pretty much the same thing. There may be some skepticism up front. There may be a lack of self-awareness, and over time that builds into awareness, and then it becomes the mental changes that lead to behavior changes.
Now that's really rich with a lot of content there, and it makes me want to go out and find a business coach immediately. And I think you're the perfect person. Let's say there's another person and they're driving in their car to a meeting right now, and they are an entrepreneur and they're leading a small team, but they're in a leadership role, and they have the self-awareness to realize, okay, there's some big gaps. Maybe they have control issues like I do, and they don't allow people to or they don't delegate to people and allow them to really do their thing as much as maybe they should. And I feel like everybody thinks they're unique and special. I am in a role in a creative business, so sometimes I'm like, okay, well, no one would really think or do it the way I would. So I need to hold on to this over here. And I'm realizing I'm not giving other people the opportunity to shine and really show what they can do. But if there is someone who is thinking, okay, I've hit my wall in terms of growth that I can give myself, and now I need someone who can coach me through what's next because I can't just stop growing. What's the best way for someone to start that Google search or start that conversation with a friend and say, hey, do you know, I hear you've been using someone, should I talk to them? How does someone start that journey?
The best, you can Google coaches, and you're going to end up with a whole mishmash of people. I had a call yesterday with a coach, and she's got a different coaching approach than I do. And I don't know whether hers is better or worse. She makes a lot of money, so I guess it's working, and she's getting referrals. But I think the best way is the same way if you're looking for a therapist. And you know what the difference between a therapist and a coach is, right? A therapist really hones in on the past to understand the present,
Yeah.
and that will inform your future. Whereas a coach says, okay, here's where you are.
Mm.
Here's where you stand today. Here's where you want to be. Now let's figure out a way to get you there. It's much more future focused, but it's very similar to that. It's calling a friend. It's, first of all, if you're running a business, there are all kinds of groups that are available to do peer coaching and counseling. There's a group called Vistage, which is pretty expensive. There's a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. There's a group called EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization. All of these are mastermind groups. So a mastermind group is a group of people that get together. A lot of them have been formalized. I run 4 mastermind groups for an organization. And you get together with people that are like-minded and in business, and all of a sudden you find out that the problems that you're having are really not any different than anybody else. And then you have people that are saying, well, that happened to me, and here's what I did about it. Or I had that kind of employee, here's what I did about it. So that's a great place to start. And a lot of those organizations will have coaching as a part of it. And, oh, by the way, one of the best things you can do is ask someone in that group, people that you've gotten to know, who's a good coach. I'm looking for a good coach, and I would really like to know who you're working with. So that's a good way.
And really what I'm hearing, the subtext of that I'm hearing is sometimes it takes that humility to be able to join a group and engage and say, hey, these are my issues, instead of thinking, oh, my issues are unique to me and to my organization.
Well,
and
unique like everybody else, right? So I run these 4 mastermind groups. I've run them for about 20 years. Some of them aren't as old as that. I've got a group of next gen that are in their 20s and 30s that are looking for the step up. But some of these longer groups, I mean, they're extremely loyal to each other, and they form such close bonds. So what we do with the mastermind groups that I run is we meet together 6 or 7 times a year on Zoom. And then once a year, we go to one of their locations. So these are logistics professionals, owners of companies all over the country. This year, in one group, I'm going to LA. I just went to LA with another group. I've got Mobile and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that we're doing meetings in. And it's those in-person meetings where they get to spend a couple of days, and they get to go to the Knowledge Center, which actually is a bar, but that's the nice name for a bar. But they go to the bar afterwards and they have a few drinks and talk about everything that's happening. And wow, they just become so loyal to each other and have such great conversations, intimate conversations about their businesses and what they're going to do with their businesses. A lot of these are family businesses that are second or third, or I've even had one member who was a 5th generation business.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very different kind of leadership than
It is.
starting it from scratch.
Well, it's stewardship.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. I always ask clients, are they building a legacy or are they building an asset?
Mm-hmm.
An asset can be sold. An asset has really no emotional connection. A legacy has all of those emotional connections. And the book I've got coming out in October is called Handoffs, which is a succession drama about a family logistics business that is going through, the multi-generational thing. I've seen enough of it. So it's different than an entrepreneur who's starting. It's now you're dealing with a dad or a grandfather. Are they willing to let go? Because now, James, you're talking about identity. Well, if somebody has been working in a business for 50 years and it's been the subject of dinner table talk, and oh, by the way, you go over to grandpa's house every Saturday night for dinner and talk about business, it's now a part of you. And now you're turning 70 and you don't trust the next generation. you're not willing to give them any slack, and they're chomping at the bit. The next generation is probably, in their 40s. And it's like, hey, I got this. And dad says, no, no, you don't. And I've seen some horrible, horrible situations where people just won't let go because it's letting go of their identity that they've built for the whole life.
That's a really good time to talk about something that has been scratching at the back of my head for a few minutes, which is the differences you see. You mentioned you run a mastermind for 20-year-old where average age is in their 20s at some point. And I'm curious what you see in leadership through the generations as a young leader comes in just full of ideas, full of energy, and then you see them mellow out a little bit, or maybe not. But then you hopefully see them mature. What's the biggest difference between someone who is coming in as a leader? Maybe they're an entrepreneur, maybe they're put or thrust into a leadership position pretty young, as opposed to someone who's maybe toward the end of their career in their 60s. What are the huge differences there?
Well, again, I think the older you get, the less you know for sure. I would love to know everything as an 18-year-old knows everything, because an 18-year-old is so sure about everything. And after you've had life kick you in the teeth a few times, you realize that you really don't know everything and you're willing to give in. But interesting how you frame the question. And I think it's a natural progression. I've had a lot of people over the years. So a lot of people have made a lot of money. Consultants have made a lot of money off of inciting, I don't want to say generational warfare, but it's saying, oh, the boomers are this, and Gen X is this, and Gen Z is this, and gee, Gen Z will never, and the millennials did this. And I still remember an article in the Wall Street Journal, and this was, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. And it said, the millennials are not buying houses and won't buy houses because they think that renting is better. The millennials were early 20s at that point.
Yeah.
No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
They're not buying houses.
Yeah.
And guess what? They got to be 30 and they started having kids and they wanted a house. And I get a kick out of these generational things.
Mm.
But there are some interesting parts. We don't know what we don't know until we know it. And if I'm 25, I am so damn sure that I know what's right until I'm proven wrong.
Yeah.
I use the term kicked in the teeth. My dad used it years ago and said, the thing I'm really worried about is you haven't been kicked in the teeth yet. And, kicked in the teeth can be a whole lot of different things. It can be, I had a starter marriage. That's what I gratefully call the 10 months that I had. Dated for 5 years and then had a starter marriage that lasted 10 months. And that's a kick in the teeth. And you get all kinds of kicks in the teeth, whether it be a rejection in a sales presentation you're making or in a startup. We all have those. I asked someone to marry me who turned me down. It's the accumulation of the kicks in the teeth that you get and the wisdom you get. And I was a boss for the first time when I was 25 years old. I had no more business being a boss at 25 years old than the man in the moon. I really had no business being the boss. And I did some really stupid things. I did not have the self-awareness or the wherewithal to be able to recover from it. There was a sales rep that worked for me, and he was probably maybe a year or two younger than I was, but he worked for me, and I rode him mercilessly. I just wanted him out of the company. We just disagreed on everybody, and I didn't know how to handle that as a boss. And eventually he left the company, and it wasn't great for me. It wasn't great for him. It wasn't great for anything. So I tracked him down probably 20 years ago and caught a hold of him on the golf course. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I mean, that's probably one of the 12 steps, right? Is making amends. Yeah. And I think I'm doing what I'm doing now to make amends for all the jerk things that I did as a kid and as a young person coming up.
I love that. And it folds beautifully into the last thing I wanted to talk about, because in reading a lot of the things that you've written, you talk about one of the most important kinds of leadership is self-leadership. And we talk a lot about that on the show here. We talk about awareness, we talk about identity, and kind of the subtext of a lot of that is self-leadership. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as a coach when the light bulb goes off in someone and they begin to understand that it's difficult to lead other people until they are leading themselves well?
Well, it is the best thing in the world for a coach to see the light bulb go off. Mm. It is a fantastic moment. But self-leadership is so important. It kind of goes along with, I use the 5 C's framework. I created the 5 C's framework. And one of the C's is clarity. And clarity says, okay, what do you want? Most people can tell you exactly what they don't want, but they can't tell you what they want. And self-leadership is knowing what you want and then finding ways to be able to get it. So when you're talking about self-awareness, you're talking about identity, when you're talking about all those things, it really starts with clarity. Is like, look, what's really important to me? And I was the same way, so I can include myself, but so many people are drawn to the progression of things. They don't think out what their career should look like because they're just doing what they're doing. I wanted to get ahead. I didn't necessarily want to do everything better because I wasn't doing the studying or that kind of thing to get better, but I just wanted to advance. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to get the next promotion, whatever the hell the next promotion was. So many people are like that. And, if I had slowed down and asked myself, okay, what do I really want? What do I want in life? What do I want my life to look like? God, that would have saved a lot of headache.
Clarity. That is something I've been trying to get a lot more of lately. And every time I get closer to it, things get a little easier. It's funny how that works. I'm on your website right now, scholzassociates.com. Is that the best place for people to connect with you and get all of your books?
That is, and there's a freebie there. Well, actually, the books are on Amazon, and also audiobooks are on audiobooks.com and at Kobo and Walmart.com and BarnesandNoble.com, a bunch of different platforms. I think they're on 8 or 10 or 12 different platforms. But the freebie that you get, so if you're on my website, go to books, click on books, and then what's Chip reading?
All right. I'm there.
And
look at there.
And each book, so if you click on one of the books, you'll see a review. And I've read all those books and I've written all the reviews, and they're a couple paragraph reviews. So it's not going to be some academic discourse on the book. It's just the way I encountered the book. And there's some I like, some that I didn't, some that I found revelatory, and some that I found kind of ridiculous. There's a book that I get a kick out of. It's called Please Help Me. And Please Help Me is a book written by, I can't remember, Marianne something. She's an Irish lass, and she writes like I'm kind of an Irish brogue. But she did one self-help book. She took on one self-help challenge a month for a year, and it damn near ruined her life. So it's a very funny book.
Oh, that's hilarious. I will have to there are tons of books. You read a lot. So yes, if someone goes here.
That isn't all the books, but that's
wow.
A lot of them.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to get inside what you've been reading and read what you think about it, there's several of these I remember reading throughout the years. So this is going to be fun to dig into.
All right.
Thank you for that. Right. That's a real gift.
And it's open to anybody. It's free, and please enjoy.
Well, Chip, thank you so much for taking time to come on and tell everybody about what you've learned over the years about wood turning, about leadership, and about life in general. This was a really fun conversation, and thank you for taking the time to have it.
James, it was my pleasure, and thank you so very much.
Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me, or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real, together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.